All right, hello there, thrill seekers. And there was a comment on a recent video from somebody who said he was accused of cultural appropriation for being into Buddhism, and he wanted to know my opinion about that. And I directed him to an article that I wrote back in 2016. I think it was called something like "Is White Buddhism Cultural Appropriation?" And in that article, I pointed out that if you're going to call so-called white Buddhism cultural appropriation, then what do you call Japanese Buddhism or Chinese Buddhism or Korean Buddhism or Thai Buddhism or Vietnamese Buddhism, etc., etc.? Buddhism did not originate in any of those countries. So you could also describe Japanese Buddhism as cultural appropriation just as much as you could describe American or British or German Buddhism as cultural appropriation if you were going to put that tag on it. And I also pointed out that Buddhism is what they call a missionary religion. Now, I don't like calling Buddhism a religion, as most people who watch this know, but it's classified among the missionary religions, which means it's a religion that doesn't keep to itself, that actively tries to bring in people from outside its original sort of fold. And I would be a good example of that because I took my Dharma transmission from a Japanese Buddhist teacher whose fondest wish was for people outside of Japan, people in the West, people in Europe and America and Australia and places like that, to take up Buddhism. So, you know, that you can't really say that a person who's been actively recruited is appropriating something. Now, I don't personally like the term cultural appropriation, but I do understand that you can be disrespectful of someone else's culture, to take something that's very meaningful to someone in another culture and kind of use it in a jokey way, or just a kind of as a fashion statement or something like that. That's not so good. That can be offensive. That can be hurtful. So I understand that. But if you're a serious practitioner of Buddhism, there's no way you could be accused of cultural appropriation. Now, I don't want to really go too much more into that aspect of things because I kind of want to stay away from things that are political or divisive. But as I was thinking through this, it occurred to me that there's an interesting case related to my own history where I could talk about how this works. So I'd like to talk about Ultraman Ace, particularly episodes 13 and 14 of this series. Now, as most of you probably know, I used to work for the company that made Ultraman, and these are now available from Mill Creek. I think it just came out last year or maybe 2 years ago at the most. So these haven't been available officially in America until very recently, but they originally came out in 1973. That was the year that Ultraman Ace was broadcast in Japan. And the episodes in question are titled, the English titles they've given them, that Mill Creek has given them, are Execution 5 Ultra Brothers, and episode 14 is 5 Stars Scattered in the Galaxy. And as you'll see in these stills, in these episodes, Ultraman and his buddies Ultra 7, Ultraman Ace, Ultraman Jack are all crucified. So, and just in case you thought this might be mere coincidence, or, you know, just it happens to look like a crucifixion and doesn't have any reference to Christianity, well, the planet on which they are crucified is planet Golgotha, and the monster they fight in the episode is named Baraba, which is short for Barabbas. So it's very much about the Christian crucifixion. When I first became aware of these episodes, because I didn't know about them, they only ever showed the first Ultraman series in America, and then the Australian Ultraman Towards the Future and Ultra 7. Okay, so there's only 3. But this Ultraman Ace was never shown in America when I was young. So I only became aware of this when I lived in Japan. And when I first started seeing these pictures, now I'm not even a Christian, but I grew up in a Christian country. I grew up surrounded by Christianity. I have a great respect for Christianity. So even I was a little bit like, I wouldn't say offended, but certainly there was a bit of like, ooh, I wasn't reaching for my smelling salts, but I was like, oh my gosh, look what they've done here. Now, you might be inclined to think, oh, this is that kind of thing. This is cultural appropriation. This is somebody who is Buddhist, being the Japanese, they would be Buddhists who are misunderstanding Christianity and presenting it this way and being offensive. But you'd be wrong, because the Tsuburaya family, Eiji Tsuburaya, was the founder of Tsuburaya Productions. He's also the man who created Godzilla, and he's often credited as being the creator of Ultraman, although that's a complicated story. But, for the sake of this video, let's just call him the creator of Ultraman, even though there were a lot of other people involved. He was a Christian. Specifically a Catholic. And what I noticed when I lived in Japan is that most people who were Christians were Catholic, and mostly they described themselves as Christian rather than saying Catholic. I don't really know why, but they tended to prefer to use that word to describe themselves. Anyway, because Eiji Tsuburaya converted to Christianity, he converted to Christianity after his wife had converted to Christianity. And because of this, several people in Tsuburaya Productions were Christians. They converted to Christianity after Eiji Tsuburaya had done so. So there was a number of Christians. So I was an American white Buddhist working in a company surrounded by a lot of Japanese Christians. And this episode of Ultraman Ace was presented as a respectful tribute to Christianity, as maybe a way of, I think maybe they thought of it as teaching the children who watched the show a little bit about Christianity, or introducing them to Christianity in what they considered to be a respectful way. Which brings up a whole other interesting area, at least to me, which is, this is a wildly different interpretation of Christianity than you would ever see in Europe or America, but it's done out of respect and love for Christianity. So, do we want to say that no, they are wrong in these Japanese Christians are doing wrong by expressing their Christianity in this way? Well, I wouldn't say so. And we can kind of move on from that and say that when Americans, British, Europeans in general, Australians, whoever, non-Asian people express their Buddhism, I would say that's also a legitimate expression of Buddhism, even though it doesn't resemble Buddhism as expressed by most people in Asia. And even if, dare I say it, it might seem a little bit offensive to Asian Buddhists. And as I pointed out, I think in yesterday's videos, or one of my videos this week, Asian Buddhists are often offended by other Asian Buddhists. I told the story about how that Chinese woman who was a Buddhist who worked at... Ziggy! Shh, shh. How the Chinese woman who was a Buddhist... Ziggy, come on, man! Ziggy! How that Chinese woman who was a Buddhist who worked at Korimbo, who ran the little, it was the Chinese vegetarian restaurant I used to go to, she was offended by Japanese Buddhists. So, so Asian Buddhists can be offended by other Asian Buddhists, is the thing. And luckily for us, the Buddhists aren't generally too offended by most of the cultural appropriation of Buddhism. Take my shirt, for example, that I'm wearing today. And let's look at some other examples.
Buddha was a good old boy, my friend. Buddha was a good old boy. I think I'll say it once again. Buddha was a good old boy. And if you see that your life is too cut, nowhere to find joy, just remember this, my friend. Buddha was a good old boy.
So as you can see, there's plenty of examples. There used to be a column in Shambhala Sun magazine when it was called Shambhala Sun, which was called Dharma burgers, and always examined these weird instances of Buddhist cultural appropriation where people used different Buddhist things in funny ways. So luckily the Buddhists aren't that offended by this stuff. So yeah, I think the way that Westerners approach Buddhism or express their Buddhism is a perfectly legitimate form of Buddhism. It's just another permutation of the overall thing that is Buddhism. A lot of people these days, it's become trendy to talk about Buddhist modernism and say that we've completely misconstrued Buddhism, for example, saying things like Buddha was not a god or a supernatural being, and removing a lot of the worshipful things and saying that these are just westernizations of Buddhism. But that's not true. If you look at Dogen, you can see that the roots were planted a long time ago for this sort of Buddhism. Okay, somebody's drilling, and people have been complaining about the noises in back of my videos, and I'm kind of done anyway. So, if you want to contribute to me culturally appropriating Buddhism even more, you can go to the URL you're seeing below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for freezels, so you don't gotta pay if you don't want to pay. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. They're drilling. Do you think people are dog appropriating? Do you think like Scooby-Doo and stuff like that is dog appropriation? What is that drilling sound? We better go check that out, huh? Okay. Talk to you later, Ziggy. Bye.